Hi there, Travel Bees. Welcome to another week. And if you have ever thought that you wanted to travel Europe but you didn't know where to start, this video is for you. Transportation is key to traveling, and I feel like a lot of people are unaware of how the transportation system in Europe works. So that leads them to be scared of actually traveling because they feel like they're going to end up somewhere and not know where to go from there. Their transportation system over there is absolutely amazing. Luckily, in Europe, it's extremely affordable, easy, and accessible to find your way around. And I'm going to share with you some of the main ways that people travel over in Europe and some tips and tricks to do with that. Really quick, I do want to mention that there are kind of 3 points that you guys want to think about when you're traveling to kind of figure out what's going to be more important to you. So there is budget and affordability, flexibility, and comfort. You're not necessarily going to be able to get all of these things to work together. So you might have to take some time to decide what's going to be more important to you, whether it be budget friendly or comfortability, along with like service and what you expect and how you want to travel when you're going to Europe. So first off, I'm going to start with planes. You got to get there somehow, right? Once you actually get to Europe, planes are actually something that you can continue to utilize while you're over there. There are a lot of budget airlines over there that will get you from country to country pretty affordably. I have once gotten a flight from England to Denmark, and that flight was 12 euros, which is equivalent to about $15 or $16, which is insane, right? I mean, you would never find that in the US. Maybe now because of Corona, but that doesn't count. So flying in Europe is actually really cheap compared to the US. I'm from the US, so I know when I'm just trying to get from Florida to North Carolina, it could cost me almost $100, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, because our states are comparable to the sizes of these countries. But this is kind of where that service and comfort aspect comes in. You can, of course, choose a airline that's going to give you all the frills and fun, right? You can always pay more for a ticket to be able to get more accessibility or more comfort with your flight. But there are a lot of budget airlines in Europe, like Ryanair, that are going to be able to give you that bare basic flight that's just going to get you from point A to point B quickly, efficiently, and without anything special. You are going to have to pay for every single thing. So that means you're going to have to pay for your baggage. If you have a lot of baggage, it might work out better for you to take those more expensive flights because your bags are going to be included. But if you are traveling like me and I only carry a backpack, which, you know, a backpacker's backpack, then you are going to only have that one baggage, and traveling light is key when traveling in general, at least for me. So they're going to make you pay for your bags. They'll even make you pay for your boarding pass if you don't print it out ahead of time. So if you want to travel on a budget, that is completely doable. Just make sure that you're reading those fine lines in between when you are booking those airlines, because you want to make sure that you are not getting screwed over in the end. You got to beat them at their own game. Next up is trains. Oh gosh, my absolute favorite way to travel is by train. I had never been on a train before I went to Europe, and it was absolutely amazing. And let me tell you why. I feel like a lot of people discredit trains because it takes longer. But when you're going to another country and you want to get that culture and that vibe, you know, get the jig of it all. I don't know why I just said jig. Anyways, you want to make sure that you're getting it all in, right? When you're taking a flight, you're skipping over everything that you could be seeing and you're missing all of that scenic view. So when you're on a train, you can look out the window. You don't have to feel pressured to stay in your seat, because when you're on a plane, you're in your seat, right? And they have the seatbelt sign and you're required to stay in your seat the entire time. What's really nice about a train is you have more flexibility and you can get up, go around. They usually have a cafe or something that you can go and purchase food from. They might have a sightseeing car of some sort, and then you can kind of just go mosey around and enjoy your time, and you don't feel restricted to your seat. Usually it's a lot more room to be able to kind of get around. And depending on the train that you're on, they might have these little private room cuticles that you can be in, or they will have them like normal train seating. It just depends on the train. With trains, you're not really gonna have to worry about your baggage because they usually allot a lot of baggage for you to bring on. And they're also really convenient because they usually end up in the middle of cities, very close to a lot of shops and restaurants, and you're just at the center of it all. So they also avoid traffic, which can be a big thing in Europe. I mean, think about going to a city in the US. You're trying to avoid that traffic at all costs, right? So trains really avoid that traffic. You can even take overnight trains where you're literally in Prague one night, you fall asleep, and then you're in Budapest the next, which is kind of cool because then you don't have to worry about it. I've slept on quite a few trains and it actually isn't that bad. I mean, if you're not a picky sleeper, it's not too bad. And you save money by not being in a hotel. A lot of people like the train aspect because they also have the hop on, hop off option. So you can get off in a city and check it out and then get back on the train. It really depends on what pass you have to be able to do that. So you can't just get off and get back on if you don't have a ticket that accommodates for that. There are a lot of different ways to get tickets, and that's kind of a whole nother topic for a whole nother video, which I will be making. But one thing I do want to mention is U-Rail is an awesome pass that you can get in Europe, and I'm going to do a whole video on U-Rail, so you keep tuned for that. But that is going to be usually your best bet if you're going to multiple countries, and they have different options. And if you're under the age of 27, you get a pretty big discount. So that's great as well. They definitely in Europe like to help the youth out and give them discounts on nearly everything with travel because they really do want to encourage youth to travel in Europe, which is good for us, right? If you're liking this video so far, you go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos every week. But going on to the next topic, here we go. Next mode of transportation I want to talk about is buses. And before you think, oh, I don't want to travel on a bus, I thought the same thing. When I first went to Europe, I thought, oh, I don't want to go on a bus because then it's going to be like those old stinky buses that, everybody's so cramped. I don't know why, but I thought of an old school bus with no AC, not enjoyable. I was like, I am not traveling that way. But that is not how they are at all. So a lot of the buses, especially the long distance ones, have AC. The seats are pretty comfortable. There's plenty of baggage space for you to be able to put onto the bus, and it's pretty comfortable and not too bad. So I can't complain about buses. They definitely aren't as bad as I thought they were, and I think you would be surprised too. Sometimes they have more room on them than some planes, because I've seen some planes where you're like touching the other person, but a lot of those buses have two seats on each side, so a row of 4 with an aisle in the middle, and it's really not too bad. They kind of make it more comfortable than some planes, I'd say, in my opinion. And taking a bus can usually be the cheapest way. It really depends on which way, and you gotta be able to maneuver and figure out which route you need to take and which way is going to be cheapest. But sometimes buses can be the cheapest route, especially if you keep an eye for those deals. But that kind of goes along for anything, whether it be trains, planes, or buses. One thing with buses is you are going to have to book ahead of time to get a better deal, which can be difficult if you're planning a trip and you're not really sure where you want to go, or you want to keep your plans flexible. At least that's what I like to do when I'm traveling. I try to be as flexible as possible because I don't want to be forced to this schedule where I'm going to be like, I have to be here at this time, at this time, at this time. And I've said that in multiple of my videos before, is that I don't like to be held to a very strict schedule because I think the flexibility is very important to enjoying your trip. In some instances as well, depending on which country you are in, you may be limited to only taking a bus too. So I remember when I was in Greece and I had taken a ferry from Italy to Greece. And when I took that ferry, it brought me to the port. I needed to get to Athens. And the only way for me to get to Athens from that ferry port was for me to take a bus that was like, I think 4 hours long, which wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad bus, but definitely some transportation in Greece was a little bit limited when it came to ease of travel. It's definitely something to be mindful of in those other countries like Croatia and Bosnia and such like that, because that's where the travel is going to be more sparse, where you're going to have to really plan where and when you're leaving. That leads into my next mode of transportation, which is boats or ferries. I really didn't realize how big these ferries are. Oh my gosh, they are huge. They're made so that people can get from place to place like Italy to Greece, etc., and they can bring their cars. So cars are driving onto these boats, and if you think about how many cars they're putting onto these boats, like you can imagine how big they are. And there's a couple of options that you can do when you're taking a ferry. Sometimes ferry isn't going to necessarily be the cheapest way to get somewhere, but sometimes they're doing deals. When I was traveling Europe, I had a U-Rail pass that I mentioned earlier, and that U-Rail pass allowed me a discounted rate onto a ferry. Granted, said, there are two different types of ways you can travel on a ferry. You can either get a deck seat, which is pretty much like sitting in a chair or wherever you can get a spot because there's so many people. So like whether that be on a lounge chair or even on the floor or wherever it might be, you can do a deck spot or you can do a private cabin. And those cabins are gonna be a little pricey, okay? So you can kind of think about that as like if you were trying to be bougie a little bit, because I knew I was gonna fork up the money for a private cabin. Plus, I think that it kind of adds to the experience to be on a boat and sleep on the deck. It was interesting, to say the least, and pretty cool. And those waves in the Mediterranean are no joke, let me just say, or at least the day that I was there. The next category I'm going to talk about of transportation is car rentals in Europe. It might seem like it's the easiest way to travel, right? Like, because when we go somewhere in the US, we're like, oh yeah, let me just rent a car and I'll just, go from boop to pop, boop, boop. Nope, it isn't as easy in Europe. And this is why. They are possible, but you want to be mindful when you're renting a car in Europe for a couple of reasons. And one of which is in the US, automatic cars are the go-to car. We have manual cars, but a lot of our cars in the US are automatic. In Europe, the case is switched. So over there, manual is all they drive. They have automatic cars, but they're not going to be as easy to find and they're going to cost you probably double. So if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend double for a rental car, completely understandable. I highly recommend learning how to drive a manual car so that you can get one of those and be sure that you're not going to get stuck there, because if you don't know how to drive a manual car and you're like, I'll just learn when I get there, you might end up stuck somewhere and that's no fun. There can be a lot of traffic in Europe, so sometimes getting a car is going to be a little bit more stressful because you're going to have to deal with all of that traffic in a country that you're not used to, as well as the fact that depending on the country that you're in, the roads might be on the opposite side, and that can be difficult in a lot of ways. I have one horror story that turned out to be for the best, but I have a horror story that I might have to share with you guys at another time about my time in Scotland. In some countries, you're going to be driving on the left side rather than the right side, and it can get kind of confusing, especially because they have a lot of roundabouts, and that's like opposite way of the roundabout for you here in the US at least. If you kind of bundle that all together, the fact that you would have to know how to drive a manual car, along with the fact that you're driving on the opposite side of the road and your driver's seat is in the opposite side of the car, it's not on the left side, it's on the right side, which can be a little daunting if you've never dealt with that perception before. I know that I was a little intimidated by it and I was thrown off. But another thing I want to mention about car rentals is if you are going to do them, they can help with getting to those obscure places that not many people go to. If you want to go on like a real adventure, if you are going to rent a car, I highly recommend getting a small car. Now, most cars in Europe are gonna be small already. I can't tell you how many times I went into a parking lot, like a big parking lot there, and all I saw were hatchback small cars, like for miles. It was crazy. But I highly recommend getting a small car, because if you don't get a small car, a lot of their roads over there are way smaller because a lot of their cars are smaller. So if you get a bigger car because you're used to a bigger car, you're gonna find yourself having trouble on the road because some of their roads are so small. I know when I was in Scotland, in the back roads of Scotland, there were some roads where you're only going one way and you have to be mindful of the cars coming this way because you have to then pull off to the side of the road and let them come. So if you have a big car, that could be a problem and just not make you feel any better or safer. So get a small car. So as you can see, there are so many different ways to travel in Europe and all of them are pretty affordable. There's different ways and different means that you can take to be able to get deals on these different aspects, but I just wanted to highlight some of the aspects so that you knew what options there were, because I definitely feel that Europe has way more options than here in the US. Here in the US, it's like if you don't have a car, I don't know how you're getting around, especially because I'm from a small town. Like there is no public transportation here. It's like if you don't have a car, you're walking. So guys, I hope you found this helpful. Honestly, I love traveling in Europe and I find the different modes of transportation very exciting, and it's sometimes not always going to be a one or the other thing. You're not always going to be just on a train or just on a bus or just on a plane. Usually you're going to have to mix and match them to be able to get from place to place. It's really easy. There are so many tools to be able to get from point A to point B. One of which I want to mention is called Rome to Rio. I'll post that that link in the description so that you guys can check it out. But it's an awesome site where you can put in your point A and your point B from anywhere, and it's going to show you a few different things. It'll show you the cheapest options, it will show you the fastest option, it'll show you the option that has the least connections. It gives you a lot of information that you can work from to be able to get from your point A to your point B. I hope you guys found this helpful, and I hope you guys are having an amazing week so far. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and don't forget to tune in next week where I'm going to talk about the difference between the American train system and the European train system. It ought to be an interesting video, so I'd love for you to check it out. If you loved this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, click the bell, and check out some of my other videos. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I'm so excited that you guys have joined me. Your support means so much. I hope you guys have an amazing week. Bye!